Happy American Thanksgiving weekend, y'all! I'm Alexa, resident Ookie Spooky Girly, and while I'm personally Canadian, I'll be proudly watching my friend Nicole as she still walks in the Macy's parade this year. So question for you, what's your favorite Thanksgiving tradition? I'm partial to pumpkin pie and stuffing, but let me know yours in the comments, and welcome to the top 5 scary true Thanksgiving horror stories. Number 5, Back from the Dead. So our narrator's name is Kyle, and like most family-based holidays, this tale starts with a 2-hour road trip, and by the time he and his family arrived at their destination, poor guy's bladder was ready to go, kaboom. So he helped his mom carry the food that they had brought to the door, only to have it swing open and shut before they could even knock. In the doorway was his Aunt Sheila, and well, the effervescent Happy Thanksgiving was a lovely sight. Kyle felt like her behavior was a little off. She looked happy to see the family, but spoke to them in a hushed, concerned tone. I need to talk to you guys about your cousin Janelle. As you probably heard, her boyfriend Dave died in a car accident a few months ago. She hasn't been taking it well and has been acting pretty odd. Now, she kept talking, but Kyle couldn't focus. He had priorities. He just nodded along until she opened the door and let them in. We've all been there. So he rushed into the house, tossed, what he was holding on the counter, gave a brief wave to everybody sitting in the living room, and then ran into the bathroom. He noticed that Janelle was sitting on the couch with her arm around some guy, so he just assumed his aunt was overreacting with the new guy or something to that effect. As he relieved himself, he heard voices coming loudly from a bedroom down the hall and tiptoed down to listen in, and realized it was his father and his aunt once again talking about Janelle. What the F is she doing? Calm down, Mark. Janelle's always been a little different. Now, Kyle was aware that Janelle was kind of the black sheep of the family. She went through a goth stage, and he'd even heard his parents talk about her being into witchcraft. The audacity. Just let me handle it. I'm gonna try and get her to help after the holidays. So after Kyle heard Aunt Sheila say that, he walked back out into the living room to meet, this new boyfriend, but Janelle and the mysterious boyfriend were nowhere. So he proceeded to go through the rest of the standard Thanksgiving festivities while waiting for the food to hit the table. He played football with his little cousins, watched the parade on TV, the usual socializing, catching up activities. When Aunt Sheila called everyone to the table for dinner, Janelle was already in her seat, and Kyle finally got a good look at the guy she brought to dinner, and his jaw hit the floor. It was none other than Dave, her boyfriend who died in the car crash. He sat there with a blank stare out of his one remaining eye, and where his other eye should have been was a large hole, which also took away most of his cheek and nose. He was dressed in a suit and tie that was covered with dirt, and Janelle called out to Kyle, "Hey, there you are! Where have you been? I don't think you've ever met Dave." She was super excited. Kyle looked at his dad, and he was shrugging "Don't ask me. Nope, don't talk to me." So Kyle was okay, got up from his chair, slowly walked over to the happy couple being "Hey Dave, nice to finally meet you." He was really just sort of taken aback with the whole situation and didn't know how to react. So Janelle leaned over to Dave, put her ear to his mouth, and said, "He says he's very happy to meet you too. Finally, he's heard a lot about you." Sorry, he's pretty shy about talking to new people. Kyle was "Yeah, no problem, I can understand that." He made his way back to his seat because he's just what on earth? Throughout dinner, everyone tried their best to ignore the situation and treat Dave like a living member of the family. Kyle's grandma even asked what he was up to these days. Now Janelle once again leaned in to pretend like he was whispering in her ear. He says he's been having trouble finding work since the accident. He was working at his uncle's office, but if he wants that job back, he kind of needs to work the graveyard shift. Now Kyle just about choked on his mashed potatoes, trying not to laugh, and followed up with, "Yeah, Dave seems like quite the find. Where'd you dig him up?" "He got some daggers from his family, don't worry." Janelle didn't pick up on the joke and went right along telling everyone how they met back in high school and have been inseparable since. She gave him a tight squeeze and a kiss on the cheek, or where the cheek used to be, and as she pulled away you could see a goopy string of some sort of fluid that was stuck on her lips, and that's when a chunk of flesh fell right off his face and into the untouched turkey and potatoes that sat on the plate in front of him. That was it. Everyone was kind of done with dinner at that point. A couple of folks had to excuse themselves, probably to upchuck. Most of the family left right after that, leaving Kyle, his parents, Aunt Sheila, Janelle, and of course, Dave. They had moved to the living room to chat, and Janelle had carried Dave with her, obviously struggling under his weight. She said that since the accident, Dave has trouble getting around on his own, which, that makes sense in theory. He only had one leg left, and it was kind of bent the wrong way. She sat Dave down on the couch, climbed up on what remained of his lap, and put her arms around his neck. As the conversation went on, Kyle started noticing something on the floor under the happy couple. It was a little white something. He was "Oh, you know what? Looks like you dropped something," and he went down to grab it for them, and it was maggots. Big pile of maggots that was falling out of Dave's suit. So after that, Kyle was "Yeah, that's it. I'm tapping out." So he and Stanley rushed home, and honestly, I'm surprised they just made it that long. Number 4, a cursed book. So Scott's family had a tradition that they would all exchange a simple gift on Thanksgiving Day to bring good fortune for the coming holiday season. The week before Thanksgiving, whole family would gather around, the names would go into a hat to be chosen at random, and that particular year he drew his older sister Claire. He was determined to get her something thoughtful. She always got him something thoughtful, so he ventured out to the local bookstore that had always weirded him out, but Claire was worth it. He was greeted by an older worker who advised him that books, just find where they're meant to be. Alrighty, he just searched for what felt like hours, and then he eventually found a small leather book bound in twine. "Many thanks" was written on the spine. He's "Oh, this is perfect." He pulled it from the shelf to have a look at its cover, and it said fully, "Many thanks, the personal diary of Harriet Luella." According to the worker at the store, it was the diary of a young woman that grew up in the area, and every year on Thanksgiving, Thanksgiving, she would write about, her year and what she was grateful for. So that makes it kind of perfect for a thoughtful gift. Scott was thrilled. He's like, yeah, absolutely. Bought it, went home. Now, he was kind of curious with the content. So later that night, he opened the book and actually lost track of time while reading about Harriet and how her older brothers had become sick and how she desperately wanted to help her mom and grandma heal them. Sadly, they passed away before she was able to. Someday, she's going to help her mom and her grandma. Now, when the Thanksgiving gift exchange finally rolled around, Claire loved the gift, opened it, began reading it immediately, transfixed. Every now and then, she'd pipe up from her book being like, oh, this girl is so young. She's so worried she isn't helping enough. It's so sad. And then she'd just go right back to reading. I love getting lost in a good book. After what felt like forever, it was finally time for the whole family to eat. So they sat around the dining room table, ready to go, and Claire was like, hey, before we eat, I'd like to read an entry from the diary I got today. She's looking at her brother and smiling, I think it's going to put some perspective on how fortunate we really are. So it was a diary entry. November 27th, 1692, age 16. Another year has passed and life seems to get ever harder. With just myself, mother, and grandmother left, it's difficult to keep up with everything that needs to be done. We all work extra hard, but since there are no men around, people whisper. Life has become so rotten in the village. We try our best to live a quiet life. It feels as if each year that goes by, I have less to be thankful for. But this year isn't the case. I have learned so much. I'm thankful for all the sacrifices that have been made so that we can remain here. I'm thankful for mother and grandmother. They saw that I was ready, and they opened my eyes to wonderful new possibilities. This year has been tough, but we will persist. Our rituals keep us safe for now. I have seen others become victim of the accusations. I have seen what becomes of them. I keep telling myself our rituals will keep us safe for now. Through all this, I am thankful for another year. So at this point, everybody at the table had naturally lowered their head and was just, listening to the story. We've got another entry though. December 10th. Tonight's the night. There's no more being quiet. There's no more hiding. No more running. They will be coming for us, but I prepared for this. I've read all of grandmother's books. On this night, the longest night, my body will burn so my soul may live. Now, at that moment, everybody's kind of like, huh? It felt like all the energy was sucked out of the room. Everybody was quiet, and Scott looked over at Claire. Now, she was still reading from the book, but there was no sound coming out of her mouth. So he looked around at the rest of the family, and they were all just staring at Claire. No moving, no expression, just. When Claire eventually did look up from the diary, her eyes were devoid of all color. Whatever was staring back at Scott was not Claire. Once again, the whole time her lips were moving, but we got nothing. Think Ariel and the Little Mermaid. But yikes! Claire, or whatever it was now, started laughing, like a low rumble that developed into a high-pitched cackle. Thankfully, this snapped Scott out of his slump, and he was like, I gotta do something. So he gathered every ounce of strength, energy, and hope that he had left and got out of his chair, and then everything went dark. The next thing he remembers is his entire family just standing over him as he laid on the floor of the dining room, with a massive headache. Thanks for the gift, Claire spoke with a smirk. He looked up, and he saw at that moment a flash of darkness behind her stare. Now, Claire moved away a year later, and every time he sees her, he swears her eyes are getting darker. Yeesh. Number 3, well, that's creepy. So one year, Barb was having Thanksgiving dinner at her mother-in-law's house, who lived just down the street from her. Very convenient. When her Ring doorbell, the ones with little video cameras, alerted her that somebody was at her door. So she opened the app to see an old man she'd never seen before entering her home. She bolted out of her chair and rushed home, but when she got there, nobody was inside. She pulled up the video feed again, saw that he exited 20 seconds after he entered, rumbling wrong house. The funny thing was, she was adamant that when she and her husband left for dinner, she locked the front door. She was questioning it, but she knew she locked it. So weird. Oh, for context, in terms of proximity, her food was still warm when she got back to her mother-in-law's house, but just absolutely wild. I always triple check my doors for that reason, my car and my apartment. Number 2, Kaboom. So one year, Trina's sister hosted Thanksgiving for her entire extended family. She set up the buffet on her glass top breakfast table because it was round, and easy for people to walk around while they made their plates. But she kind of forgot, and I'm not a science girly, but I know this. Heat, glass, disaster. So, as you can expect, halfway through the meal, there was a huge boom! The glass table had cracked in half and all the hot dishes hit the ground. Luckily, everybody had already made their plates, but her sister obviously had to get a new table. Apparently, it was the only leftover last Thanksgiving they'd ever had, and I'm like, oof, poor food waste. Number 1, where's the fire extinguisher? So, when she was younger, Patty and her cousins were on the stairwell with a direct view of the kitchen, while all the grown-ups were in the other room. They're little, you hang out, you chit-chat, you gossip. Her aunt went to put a casserole dish in the oven when a ball of flame burst out and caused her to recoil. Everybody was stunned, think that scene in the Santa Claus. Just okay, nope, fire, we don't do that. Patty's aunt stood straight up and laughed and walked over to her and her cousins it was no big deal. Her one cousin was like, hey mom, what happened to your eyebrows? So everything on Patty's aunt was singed. The lace on the apron, the bangs were frizzled, everything. Just, burned to a crisp. Suddenly it dawned on her entire family that her aunt had turned on the gas oven before lighting the pilot. So basically the entire house could have blown up. Much concern. Now the aunt refused to go to the hospital, and later while serving dinner, she's like, oh, I thought I put on pantyhose today. Yeah, they evaporated. Thank goodness my personal stove isn't gas, because that would totally be dangerous for my health. Once again, I'm an ADHD girly. I'm a bit of a scatterbrain. I'm lucky if I remember my head. And that brings us to the end of our time, and you know what? I'm gonna just continue safely enjoying the small dinner events I go to for holiday celebrations. They're chill, they're safe, I don't have to do the cooking, it's lovely. If you enjoyed my ramblings today, could you help us out by giving this video a like, subscribing if you weren't already, hit the bell for more holiday-centric content from us here at Top 5 Scary Videos, and I'll see y'all next time, you lovely spooky people.